Well, we are going crazy today, and I'll tell you why. We are answering questions left and right. Some of you have asked questions, haven't had a chance to do it on the Ask Kamp Kenan channel, but on the Army channel, we can do whatever we want, folks. So, Tom.
Yes, my idea was, before I give them all to you,
right,
let's answer all the questions that we didn't answer on the air on the Kamp Kenan channel for March.
Okay.
So this is the remainder of questions that are good ones that people asked in March, and we're going to give them a quick answer.
Okay,
right
Tom,
now.
go
Let's
ahead.
Rifle them off. First one.
Yeah.
What's a good first snake? My wife has been talking about us getting one, Dylan Cloud.
Well, that's a pretty cool wife. Got to be honest. Anytime a wife's talking about getting a snake, we got to love that. Well, a good first snake is definitely something along the lines of the corn snake or a ball python. They don't get large. They're easily handleable. They can be fed easily. I'm going to stick my hand in the surprise grab bag here. Hopefully not get bit. Just put your hand in like you mean it and pull out a snake. Now these snakes are the Timor pythons, right? We've seen them before. These guys aren't necessarily a good first snake because they get a little bit larger and they can sometimes be nippy. So you want to make sure that you're going with an animal that is handleable. Well, geez Louise, I almost got attacked. And it was nothing. But anyway, get back out here. Get back out. See, he's a little shy. Anyway, you want to go with an animal that is handleable, that is personable, and I would suggest the corn snakes. The ball pythons are great.
What about king snakes?
King snakes are another great species. They don't get too large. They are a constrictor. All snakes are going to eat some rodents, so you got to be ready for that. But you know, that would be my suggestion. I like the corn snakes and kings over the ball pythons because the activity levels are a little bit higher. So that's what I'd say. We're going to move along and answer another question.
All right, next
Dealer's
question.
choice, Tom.
Do all tortoises pass urates? I have 2 Burmese browns and 1 elongated that have never passed any. My little star does about once a week. I have seen the others pee, but there's never anything white. Diana Taylor.
All right, Diana. Yes, they all pass urates. The urates is the white substance that comes out. It doesn't always come out the same time that they urinate. It can come out on its own. You want it to be in a more toothpaste-like consistency. That means that the animal is hydrated. You were talking about mountain tortoises. We're in here with the elongateds. I don't necessarily always see the urates, but they are passing it. As long as they're passing liquid, that's important too, because you know the urates is the solid representation of uric acid. They don't pass it as a liquid; they pass it as a solid. Now there is, and I have had problems where some of my tortoises years ago, like my sulcatas, tortoises that most people think don't need to drink, they were getting an impaction of their kidneys, of the urates building up in their kidneys, and they go into renal failure. Very, very, very debilitating. They lose weight, they get sick, and they just slowly perish. So what I would suggest to you is always offer your animal water. Soak them twice a week. You can feed them melon, watermelon, foods that are high in a moisture content so that they're always hydrated. And then just keep an eye on them. Make sure that they're moving around, they're eating healthy, and keep up with that supplementation. But yeah, they all pass urates. Trust me, it's happening.
All right, ready for the next one?
Yeah, where are we going? What's relevant?
This might be relevant right for the cherry heads over there.
Well, the cherry heads are back there.
The redfoots, I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries.
Does having multiple tortoises together stimulate them to move around and exercise? My single cherry head seems to only move around when I take him out of his cage. Nathan C.
All right, Nathan. You see, I'm glad we're walking around doing this because I can pick things up that might have fallen down in the high wind we just had. Nathan C, he's asked questions before. We like Nathan. You know what, again, this is similar to questions that have been asked on the main channel about adding tortoises together, you know, or should I have more than one tortoise. You know, in some ways, having more tortoises will stimulate activity because, you know what, there's others of their kind, they interact, they come out and feed together, they breed, they do different things. What I would suggest with your cherry head is give it a good misting. Tortoises are more active after a light rain or a heavy rain. The humidity goes up, they start to move around. I don't know how old your tortoise is. It is possible that he has nothing to live for. He's all alone and he doesn't see any of his own kind, and that's why I like having other tortoises, because they do tend to interact when you see them. For example, we have some over here.
I would say also, isn't it a space thing? He says it only moves around when he takes them out of his cage. It's because he's got more space to roam and he wants to
that can
explore,
be true,
maybe, right?
Perhaps. Or he's just been moved, so he's a little nervous, and you know, he's trying to find a place to hide. Because if it's a young tortoise, most baby tortoises want to hide, because if they're out in the open, if you're a baby tortoise, what's going to happen to you? You're going to get plucked off by a predator, either from the sky or from the ground. So they want to hide, and they move under the cover, under the cover of high brush and such, so that they can kind of eat, get bigger, and then move around. So a lot of people get worried about their baby tortoises not moving around much, and that's okay, because most of the time these guys are actually very shy. But there are some species that just aren't, like sulcatas. They usually move around all the time. Trimisium, adding some cover, maybe making the enclosure a little bit more interesting, put the food at the far end, generate some kind of movement for that animal, and that should help you out. Or a reason to move for that animal. Next question.
Next question.
Yeah, where are we going?
Dr. Harkin, where I
I'm no doctor. I'm no doctor.
Where I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, I get months of 85 to 90 degree days with 55 to 65 degree nights with no rain at all. In the winter, we get upper 50 degrees during the days with mid 40s at night. We get below 40 a half dozen times a year. If I planned on getting the tortoises inside when it was below 50 degrees and rainy, which if any species of tort could do well outside year-round here. Rich McCole.
All right, Rich, that's a tough one. That's a tough one, and I'll tell you why. Number one, I'm sure there are some people that keep, you know, some testudos, some like maybe Greek tortoises or something like that. Now, my experience with San Francisco is it is actually cold and rainy. What was it? The coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco. So I don't know if there's any species that I would feel comfortable leaving outdoors all year long. You're going to want something that can take cooler temps, high humidity. You've also mentioned that some of the animals, sometimes the environment, it actually has a dry season. I just don't know intimately too much about the environment to say for certain. I'm sure there is some species, like perhaps the elongated tortoise, can take it, but I wouldn't want to risk it.
To me, as a layman, it just sounds like, what's the ultimate all-weather tortoise? Yeah. Is there such a thing, right? Like,
no.
Or what's the most all-weather tortoise? There is no such thing,
There really is
right?
no such thing as an all-weather tortoise. They're from specific habitats. They've been adapted to live in those specific environments, and you really don't want to bring them outside of those parameters for too long, because you're going to wind up getting trouble. Here in Florida, you know, when I say elongated tortoises are really perfect for Florida, I mean they can take a week at 40 degrees, you know, as long as there's a lot of leaf cover, or not even a week, like a night, and then it goes back up. Very rarely do we have weeks straight of cold weather. So certainly not at the level that San Francisco has. What I would recommend is working with a small species of tortoise. Forget about keeping them outdoors at all times, and then what I'm going to hold this so Tom can pick up the thing. That's okay. So what I would do then is, you know, get a tortoise that's small enough that you can actually just go ahead and bring inside when the outside environment is just not conducive to that species. Go with the testudo, maybe elongated tortoises, cherry heads, anything small that you can easily bring indoors would be my bet. There you go. We have more questions?
Sounds good. Two more.
Two more questions. Hey, we're at the pond, by the way,
yeah.
And it's growing in nicely. Just a little side note. I was garbage picking, and I got some bromeliads, man. Someone was throwing away some perfectly good bromeliads. So I planted them all around. They should propagate. Pretty cool, huh?
Good, yeah.
Thanks, yeah, cool.
All right, ready?
Yeah, ready.
How much space does a box turtle, eastern box turtle specifically,
look at that,
need ideally for indoor enclosures? For an amber futch.
Amber futch. All right, Amber, we're actually here at the pond, and we have 4 Chinese box turtles that are living in this area. It's a large area. Eventually, there's going to be 19 of them living here. There are plenty of places for them to hide. Little caves, a lot of cover, a good water source. But to answer your question, indoors, I would say, you know, inside for an eastern box turtle, you're talking about an animal that lives most of its life in the area the size of a football field in the wild. Now, as we know, they're one of the species that are getting more and more fragmented because of new buildings, roads, things like that. When I was growing up, I'd find tons of eastern box turtles right down the road from me. Well, a few years later, in those vacant lots, houses went up, turtles gone. So I would try and give them enough room to feel comfortable. So an indoor turtle table for one eastern box turtle should be at least 8 foot long. Maybe one sheet of plywood, 4x8 sheet would be nice. That should be good. And then I would try and get that animal an outdoor enclosure, you know, as soon as I could, at least for the summer months, so that animal can be outside. I just love animals outside. They do so much better, and I wouldn't want to live indoors my whole life either. So just think about how stir crazy you get living up north when it's 6 months into a really hard winter, which actually is happening right now in April. Right, Tom?
Right.
What was the temperature when you left this morning?
I left Connecticut this morning and was so bummed when I looked out my window. I have a thermometer, 25 degrees.
25
My grass
degrees.
is frozen, and it's April, I don't know, 10th, 11th? What
Something
is
like that. Yeah.
Ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
Anyway.
Anyhow, there you go.
Not to date this, but I just dated it. All right, here we go. Last question, right?
Yep.
It's another cold climate thing. Hey, Kenan, what's the best way to raise a Sulcata tortoise in Ontario climates or other coldish climates? Tessa Miles, Ontario, Canada. Gets
Ontario,
cold.
Canada, not Ontario, California, right?
My guess would be she means...
I know,
yeah.
Ontario, Canada. Don't get a Sulcata tortoise. I just wouldn't recommend it. You know, if you can avoid getting one of those tortoises, I would. You're talking about an animal. Well, let's wander over. You're talking about an animal that really moves around a lot. High energy animal. They're grazing animals. They're walking around all the time, constantly eating. If you do not provide them with their proper diet and with the proper space, you're not going to have long-term success. You'd have to spend a great deal of money, because we're talking about an animal that could potentially reach weights of 150 pounds. 200's not unheard of. This is a very large tortoise. You've seen it time and time again, guys. I'm limping, you'll notice. I got a bad hip right now. I pulled a muscle. But anyhow, enough of my whinging. Here's their Sulcata pen. Look at where they are. They're all out doing their thing. They're moving about, they're grazing. You don't want to keep these guys contained. You want them to get out there and move around. So I wouldn't get one. The best thing you could do if you had one, I would buy a greenhouse and set up the greenhouse best I could, so that the animal can move around and have a lot of space to roam.
That's the only way, right?
That's
you need
the
a
only
large
way. I mean, there
greenhouse.
are
There's
people
no...
that do it, and I'm not trying to poo-poo what they do. Some do it, they do a great job, but at the end of the day, nothing beats being outdoors. And so that's what you have to consider, the long-term health for the animal and the ease of keeping the animal for yourself. Go with a smaller tortoise. If you want a spur thigh, get the Greek variety, and that would be much easier for you to deal with. There you go. Is that it?
That's it.
That's it? All right, cool. So Tom's idea has come to fruition. We just shot this in lickety-split, no time at all. Took a little wander around. Appreciate you guys for subscribing to Kamp Kenan Army channel. If you somehow haven't seen the main channel, Kamp Kenan, go over there and subscribe as well. I'm going to get to work, and
more importantly, keep those questions coming on Patreon.
That's
where
right.
it's all coming through to
Go
Patreon.
over to patreon.com/KampKenan,
Yeah.
and submit your questions, and we'll get around to answering them all.
Yeah.
Just like we did today.
Very good.
See you later.
Bye.